I do.
이 영화는 심전에 관한
This is a film about psychological warfare,
왜곡된
a
정보를
specific type of warfare designed to distract,
무감각하게 만들어
misinform,
But trust me,
특정 형태의
and anesthetize the brain.
형식. 심리전은 변장수에 있는
It has many disguises
많은 모습으로
and is used against every one of them,
아울러 노동자,
against them
어린이, 일반 인민 한 사람
and against
한
them.
사람을 대상으로 하고 있다. 물론 이와 같은 검모
Of
술수적
course,
행위는
such Machiavellian activity requires a disguise,
프로파간디스트들이
which is why propagandists call themselves the public relations industry. But do not be fooled. Public relations and propaganda are interchangeable, and it is the massive public relations industry that is designed to alter perception, reshape reality, and manufacture consent.
A Hollywood set designer was brought in to create a $200,000 backdrop for official war briefings.
Today, America alone has more public relations propagandists than reporters, which means that nearly half of what people in the West hear, see, or read is written by professional liars. Professional liars whose job it is to keep people in front of their televisions, reading gossip magazines, eating vast amounts of toxic food, and shopping, always shopping, for the latest fashions and trends. That's the ideal for propagandists. And great efforts are made in trying to achieve and maintain that ideal. Anything that keeps the masses from organizing themselves and asking important questions about what their masters are really up to. The 1960s, a period of heightened awareness and rebellion against the establishment, with students leading the resistance. But when the situation seems to be getting out of hand, the establishment ordered it to be stopped, and the propagandists moved quickly to lead the young people away from dangerous protests into such fashionable protests. That was then. This is now. Fashion, celebrity, sex, music, technology, any kind of revolution except the social revolution. In this film, we will reveal the methods used by the propagandists to control populations on behalf of their owners. Although these rich and powerful owners only make up 1% of the world's population, they have mastered the use of propaganda over 99% of the world's population, turning them into consumer slaves who work harder and harder to buy things they don't need. These consumer slaves are also made to pay taxes to their government, money which is used to develop new weapons for the pernicious invasions and occupations of other countries. In the last 5 years alone, they've given their owners more than $1 trillion for these illegal and immoral wars that can't be won, and are even encouraged to send their own children to fight them. This is Doctor of Psychology, Professor
어떻게 인류를 무감각,
You have just been exposed to a range of propaganda devices used by the West to control, manipulate, neutralize, and anesthetize entire populations,
인민들을 포함한
its own
다른
and that
나라의
of other nations.
인민들까지 모두 다 말이다. 이와 같은 정신적 왜곡 방법의 성공 비결은 어떻게
The success of these mind-warping devices depends on their remaining hidden from the masses.
남아 있느냐 하는 것에 있다고 할 수 있다. 그러나 경애하는 지도자 동지는 인민 모두가 스스로의 눈으로 정확하게 어떻게
But our dear leader
정신
has
세계에
insisted
대한
that you see with your own eyes exactly how this war against the mind is used to turn Western citizens into compliant slaves.
이용되는지를 볼 것을 주장해 오셨다. 지금 이 사람이 세계 신기록을
Has this man just broken a world record?
아니면 지금 이
Has he
사람이
just created a medicine that can save thousands of lives?
아마도 이
Perhaps he has
사람이
been chosen to represent his community in some way. No, this man has just purchased a telephone.
휴대전화 구매에 성공하였다. 그렇다면
And these people,
무엇이 이들을
what is
그런
making them
즐거운
scream and
기록으로
cry with such profound joy?
속에서 기쁘게 만들었는가?
They are on a television program where they are receiving consumer items.
취한 것뿐이다.
This for some boots.
보추이며
This
이것은
for some
옷들이다.
clothes shelves.
그리고 이
And
광풍이
this
부는
hysteria
상태는
is not
신을
because they have found
발견했기
God,
때문이 아니고
but because they are receiving sneakers. The propagandist knows that an individual has a natural desire to be on a winning side and appear to fit in with the crowd. One of the easiest ways to achieve this is to make them chant favorable, yet deliberately vague slogans like, "This changes everything."
This is going to change everything.
Just do it. I'm loving it. Or support our troops. The point of slogans like support our troops is that they don't mean anything. That's the whole point of good propaganda. You want to create a slogan that nobody's going to be against and everybody's going to be for. Nobody knows what it means because it doesn't mean anything. Points out Professor Noam Chomsky.
이것을 염두에 두고 보면
With this in mind, propagandists can provide simple answers to complex problems and ask for approval without question.
Either you're with us, either you love freedom, or you're with the enemy.
이들은 이 방법을 이용하여
They can use this method to sell phones, violence, cosmetics, or even false wars, like the unwinnable war on terror announced by these degenerates, and the hypocritical war on drugs announced by this master criminal, who is awarding a medal to this man for joining the war on drugs, despite this man being a drug addict.
만들어낼 수 있는 것이다. 가장 인기 있는 슬로건들은
The most popular slogans contain virtue words that embody what slaves in the West have been conditioned to value most dearly. Words like
자유,
freedom,
진실,
truth,
평화,
peace,
해방과 같은
liberty,
단어들이며
and
가장
most
중요한
importantly,
단어는 민주주의.
democracy.
가장 인기 있는
The
슬로건들은
20th century has been characterized by three developments of great political importance: the growth of democracy, the growth of corporate power,
진실,
and the growth of corporate propaganda as a means of protecting corporate power against democracy. Writes Howard Zinn. Let's look at that last line again. The growth of corporate propaganda as a means of protecting corporate power against democracy. Is this true? Let's look at the facts.
Killed. But your government has...
Since 1945, America has tried to overthrow 50 governments, many of them democracies. In the process, over 30 countries and their people have been attacked, including our own great and powerful socialist sovereign nation. And the result? Not one single undemocratic country has been turned into a genuine democracy.
Open the door! Get your hands up and come outside. Yeah, clear the house now.
I want peace as much as you do.
The grotesque act of invading other countries, claiming them as your territory, and stealing their resources to keep your emperor, crown, or corporate owners in power used to be known as empire building. The latest propaganda slogan for empire building is globalization, a vague word with warm connotations of unification. But what it really means is the acquisition of other people's resources at any cost, and unlimited slave labor. Slave labor needed to produce the unnecessary goods sold to these slaves. Slaves to persuasion and influence. In reality, these are debt slaves, since they can't even afford the things they buy. Even in times of peril and economic meltdown, at the orders of their president, they must keep consuming. Is this democracy? On February 15, 2003, millions of people worldwide took to the streets in the world's largest ever day of protest. A protest against the pirate Bush regime and their British and Australian lapdogs who wanted to go to war on manufactured grounds. The majority of the world voted against this war, but were ignored. Is this democracy? The powerful 1% went ahead with their pre-planned war, as always, using the poorest people's children to do the fighting.
We're here for your freedom! So back up right now!
It's important to note that these cowards were happy to order mass death and destruction, despite never having been in battle themselves. Is this democracy? No. Real democracy is when the majority of people make a decision and it's upheld. For example, in polls taken throughout the world, the vast majority of citizens want to see these war criminals committed to stand trial for crimes against humanity. Since 90% of the casualties of their false war on terror were innocent civilians. War on terror is a vague propaganda slogan, as a real war on terror would include direct intervention in Darfur, Myanmar, and Zimbabwe, where Robert Mugabe has made a mockery of the Americans' claim to love democracy. A real war on terror would start with American citizens refusing to pay taxes that support Israel's illegal occupation of Palestine. Taxes that could be used to help Americans who are unemployed, working without health care, and homeless. Of course, if you dared to point this out in America, you would be named anti-American and a traitor, or one of those who hate freedom. So people keep quiet because they are afraid of expressing how they feel.
If we are not vigilant.
You've got to keep them pretty scared, because unless they're properly scared and frightened that all sorts of devils are going to destroy them from outside or inside or somewhere, they may start to think, which is very dangerous, because they're not competent to think. Therefore, it's important to distract them and marginalize them.
Noam Chomsky
Points out Professor Noam Chomsky.
하지만 대중 집단을 소외시키고 교란시키는 것에 앞서
Before you can distract and marginalize them, however, you first have to know what motivates them.
알아내어야 할 것이다.
Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
Fear is the engine room of imperial propaganda.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun, that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Those who have understood this have manipulated people for centuries, indeed millennia, by manufacturing and controlling religion. The Western religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Catholicism use a propaganda manual called the Bible. Although it is the same story, each brand claims its version is the best one. As with any advertising, the propagandist knows that there is no idea easier to sell than the idea that you are vastly superior to everyone else. So they tell their followers that they are unique in human history, that they are descended from the first man and first woman, and that they are chosen by their supreme creator to rule over all other cultures. To secure the deal, they add the idea of an eternal soul. That way, death doesn't seem so bad, and they won't resist being sent to fight against competing brands. Religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. Seneca the Younger. Of course, only the truly ignorant believe that books like the Bible are really the Word of God. Religion is horribly, unmistakably human. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it. A petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak. A vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser. A misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. Scientist Richard Dawkins. With the use of science, we can now diagnose God as a psychopath with extreme narcissistic personality disorder. He is a character created by humans who sought to control others by naming themselves as prophets of God. While most people who claim to be prophets of God are kept in mental asylums, others make their way into positions of power. Hence today, I believe I am acting in accordance with the will of the mighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord. Adolf Hitler. Working in accordance with God isn't just for believers. British Prime Minister Tony Blair turned to Catholicism after killing as many innocent Muslim civilians as possible. Now he can be forgiven for mass murder and sit next to his God for eternity. All he has to do is sit in a box and confess his sins to a priest. For terrorists like Tony Blair, the Mafia, and the IRA, Catholicism is the ideal choice. The Catholic Church wholeheartedly supported the Nazis, and with the help of the CIA, continued to protect them after the fall of the Third Reich by passing them along the infamous rat line to safety in America. It also goes out of its way to protect the malignant child abusers who run its operations worldwide. Most of all, it protects the Pope, the richest man in the world, who travels to Africa pleading for an end to poverty, despite never using his own riches to help his most desperate followers. Instead, he promises the poorest that they will be the richest in heaven.
This crusade, this war on terrorism, is going to take a while.
This toxic Texan claims that God told him to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. So he did, killing hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. He must speak to the same God as his father, whose war and sanctions killed millions of innocent civilians in the same place.
I have said to the people of Iraq that our quarrel was not with them, but instead with their leadership, and above all with Saddam Hussein. You, the people of Iraq, are not our enemy. We do not seek your destruction.
This man clearly enjoys killing people. Even though he was too scared to fight for his country during the American War of Aggression in Vietnam, he broke all records for killing prisoners during his time as governor of Texas. Such a civilized society, America, where this two-term president refused to pardon Ricky Ray Rector from execution. A man so severely retarded that when the guards interrupted his last meal to lead him to his execution, he assured them it was okay because he would just have to finish it when they got back. Like God, these leaders show no mercy to the weak. Even in their own country, after a devastating hurricane, no mercy for the weak. And here, no mercy for the weak.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Although the psychopath makes up less than 5% of the Western population, those infected with narcissism and unusual intelligence force their way into the 1% who rule over the masses. Drawn to politics and big business, they are strongly against democracy. Because in a true democracy, these treacherous monsters would be impeached and sentenced to death for lying, fraud, treason, race hate, mass murder, and war crimes. But impeachment is not acceptable, declared this smiling new president, who came to power in 2009. Why? Because he is one of them. His advisors are drawn from the same gang of Washington thugs and Wall Street banksters as the so-called opposition. His presidency was paid for by the same lobbyists and corporations that sponsored all of the other presidents before him. Here we see the most obvious lie in democracy, the one that two candidates represent a choice when they are clearly run by the same interests. There's actually a single-party system in the United States, a Demo-Republican Party, under the guise of two parties, Democrat and Republican. No matter which of the two you vote for, you vote for the Demo-Republican Party. This was said by a conservative ideologue, R. Ridger.
This time, vote like your whole world depended on it.
Allowing people to vote for one of your brands is the best way to make them feel like they are connected to their candidate and involved in a democracy. When they become wary or distrustful of one candidate, you give them a completely new smiling face and simple slogans like, "Yes, we can," and "Time for change," that are easy to chant and provide hope, but are essentially meaningless. Meaningless because this charming president will do exactly what he is told to do by his corporate masters, spending countless billions on killing humans in faraway lands, while his own people continue to suffer. Democracy is just a slogan.
Survivor is coming with a super big cast.
In this vulgar television series, carefully selected Americans have to pretend to survive by being the most conniving, manipulative, and money-hungry contestant on embarrassingly contrived multi-million-dollar sets to win money.
For $1 million, I can do just about anything.
This is a perfect metaphor for America, where the real survivors are the millions of homeless people who don't get to go home after filming. Look at these images from celebrated filmmaker Quentin Tarantino. What happened to this man as a child? What did America do to him that he should make such images for people to watch? Is he a psychopath? No. He is simply reinterpreting the Western cult of death he grew up with for new generations of consumer zombies who crave seeing their fellow humans mutilated in new and inventive ways. This cult of death is rooted in the Bible, which the imperialist slaves believe is actually the word of God, the same God that's used to send them to kill humans on the other side of the world because they have a different God. God and country are an unbeatable team, They break all records for oppression and bloodshed. Louis Buñuel. Here we see the simplistic duality of good versus evil, peddled by today's rulers. God is on our side, and everyone is choosing our brand. Make your choice. You're either with us or against us. This reassures the 99% that the 1% is strong and has everything under control. Now they can relax and get back to their football game, video games, TV shows, or go shopping. The 1% have always controlled the 99% with religion. They are the ones who control information and decide what people think. They even decide what people know about the past. Who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past. George Orwell.
Some people running along the dikes. Roger. Good job. I saw you splatter one right in the back with a rocket. Roger, got lucky again.
When carrying out attacks on other nations, destroying their infrastructure, and deforming their future generations with the use of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, the imperialist needs to rewrite history and keep repeating it over and over until it becomes true.
Young lady with the red hair right behind the school teacher there.
Mr. President, why did you drop the atom bomb?
Mr. President, the future wants to know, was it right to drop the atom bomb?
I made the only decision I ever knew how to make. I did what I thought was right.
Throughout the years of negotiations, we have insisted on peace with honor. Let us be proud of the young Americans who served with honor and distinction.
The U.S. military in the world today.
And the case is built.
See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda. George W. Bush. Repeat over and over that the Nazis killed 6 million Jews in World War II, and the Jews will enjoy endless sympathy, despite Israel continuing to commit many of the same crimes as the Nazis. But if you keep silent about the 26 million Russians killed by the Nazis in World War II, then Russian suffering becomes invisible. Let us see now how this has been applied throughout history. Every year, America celebrates the progress of Western civilization with a propaganda campaign known as Columbus Day. 500 years ago, Christopher Columbus set off to claim new riches for the Catholic Church. Arriving on a lush Hispaniola in 1492, he spoke of the 3 million Taino Indians who came out to greet them as the friendliest, kindest people in the world. He then systematically enslaved, raped, and killed them, at such a rate that by 1555, every single one of them was dead. Christopher Columbus not only opened the door to a new world, but also set an example for us all by showing what monumental feats can be accomplished through perseverance and faith. George H.W. Bush.
백인 그리스도교도들의
Such perseverance and faith was the basis of Manifest Destiny, in which the American government decided that God wanted white Christians to take over the continent.
자연과 조화를 이루며 살던 1억 명의
Their God clearly didn't like the 100 million Native Americans who lived in harmony with nature, as 99% of them were systematically murdered. This fact is now celebrated with a propaganda campaign called Thanksgiving Day. Only nobody speaks of land theft, genocide, or destruction of culture. Nobody questions the propaganda films depicting Native Americans as violent savages, trying to stop God's civilized white settlers from making a home. They're too busy eating and celebrating, unaware that the few remaining Native Americans hold a national day of mourning on the same day as a protest against this invasion.
Ironically,
the Americans also have a day for celebrating their victory over invaders. Independence Day is a celebration of the Declaration of Independence, which was created by intellectual men whose visions were similar to the superior ideals of Juche. Their vision for a glorious nation of equal and happy citizens who were not oppressed by the forces of religion and empire now lies in pieces, crushed beneath the uncontrolled drive for profits that have led to enormous human suffering and environmental destruction. But America is not the only perpetrator of crimes against humanity and the planet. Imperialism is in the heart of the British, occupying India and running opium wars out of China. It twitches in the spine of the wicked Japanese, the French in every continent, and the World Bank and IMF in every poor country since World War II. All have committed grave crimes against humanity in their search to conquer, steal, and erase memories with their lies. Lies like Australia Day, a celebration of the day in 1788 when Australians, who were merely geographically displaced European criminals deemed unworthy of being on British soil, were sent off to settle as far away as possible. These low-grade humans call Australia the lucky country. But their arrival was not so lucky for the Aborigines, who had been there for 40,000 years. For them, the oldest human presence on Earth, the lucky country is a propaganda phrase used to cover up Australia's most enduring taboo, genocide. White Australians don't like that word. They admit to words like pacifying, killing, cleansing, excluding, exterminating, poisoning, shooting, and starving. Anything but genocide. Anything but the truth. Look at this film called Australia. It was made with large tax breaks by the Australian white government to advertise Australia as the lucky country. It used an Aboriginal child to distract people from the ongoing genocide there, and the fact that Australia is now a dumping ground for nuclear waste, by its British and American masters.
어린이를 이용하였다. 악랄한 과거를 인정하지 않으려고 하는 또 다른 나라는
Another country that refuses to acknowledge its psychopathic past is Japan.
은폐하려고 하는 실패한 제국, 일본이라고 할 수 있다.
A failed empire that tries to cover up all of its vile and putrid atrocities.
그것을 가차없이 도륙을 내버린다. 일본인들은 심지어
While the world cares for threatened species, the Japanese butcher them relentlessly.
즐기기까지 한다.
The Japanese even enjoy luring dolphins into harbors and murdering them in a rage. This barely disguised need to mutilate life is no surprise to us in Korea.
하지만 이 부분에 대해서는 잠시
But we
후
will
다시
come to this shortly.
우선 프로파간다가
First, let's examine how propaganda was turned into such an effective weapon by the West.
먼저 살펴보기로 하자. 현대 프로파간다는 미국의 대중여론을
It is a remarkable fact that modern propaganda began with the British,
동조를 얻어내기
who
위하여
established a secret war propaganda bureau in 1914
선전국을
in
설치한
order to sway American public opinion and gain sympathy for the Allied
놀라운
cause.
사실이 아닐 수 없다. 이 공작은
It was headed by George Creel, who described it as
묘사하였다. 판매
a
기술의
vast
정확한
enterprise in salesmanship, the world's greatest adventure in advertising.
그의 가장 최우선의 임무는 비록
His
미국
immediate job
본토가
was to convince the pacifist American people that a war some 4,000 miles away was worth fighting, even though American soil was not threatened.
안전주의 미국인들에게 설득하는 것이었다. 헐리우드는 8천만 명의
Hollywood helped this
시청자가
cause by exploiting a weekly film audience of 80 million with titles such as The Hun Within,
짐승,
The Kaiser, The Beast of Burden, and The Claws of the Hun, which all suggested that the German threat was right on American soil.
선전하는 것으로 이 공작에 촉조하였다.
The process worked so well that Americans learned to hate German civilians almost as much as the targeted German government. And just 6 months after his re-election, on a stay out of the war pledge, President Woodrow Wilson declared war on Germany.
And a League of Nations.
1 week later, the US set up its own propaganda organization, the Committee on Public Information, which became so successful that it continues to this day as the United States Information Agency.
영국이 평화 상태에서는 프로파간다를 금지하는
While the
동안
British abandoned propaganda in peacetime, the Americans maintained its use under the leadership of Creel Commission psychologist Edward Bernays.
그는 미국의 대중 의견은 반드시 사회 내 소수
who argued that American public opinion must be engineered from above by society's few masters,
주장하였다. 1% 집단,
the 1%,
오합 지졸들을
to control the rabble.
So Eddie began to formulate.
그의 첫 번째 실험은
His first experiment was to convince American women that smoking was glamorous and liberating, despite common fears that smoking was associated with prostitution.
만드는 것이었다.
New York held an Easter Day parade.
그는 모델을
He
고용하여
did this by hiring models to march in New York's Easter parade, each holding a lit cigarette and wearing a banner proclaiming it a torch of liberty.
그 실험을 대신했다. 세계는 곧바로
The business world then turned to Bernays to indoctrinate citizens with the capitalist story until the masses willingly adopted the idea that America is a country of big business, by big business, and for big business.
파시즘이란 기업주의라고 불리는 것이
Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism, because it is a merger of state and corporate power.
때문이다. Benito
Mussolini.
나치 선전부 장관.
Meanwhile, Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels was openly thanking the British and Americans for their propaganda model
독일민이
and put it to
전쟁에
good use
앞다투어
for rallying the
참전하게
German
만든
people to war.
신중하게 활용하였다.
Wenn nötig, totaler und radikaler, als wir ihn uns überhaupt erst vorstellen können.
역사적 자료들을 보면 괴벨이
Historical documents prove that Goebbels ordered stormtroopers to burn down the German Reichstag, which he blamed on the communists.
명령하였다는 것을 증명하고 있다. 이 사건들은
This had the desired effect of frightening the population, who surrendered their civil rights, and enabled the Nazis to swiftly transform Germany from republic to fascist state and launch World War II.
In 1940, Hitler had conquered France.
3,500만 명이란 목숨.
35 million lives were given up in World War II in patriotic fervor, created by propaganda campaigns.
희생되었다.
Australia marches with Britain, land of plenty, land of untold resources, all placed gladly, willingly at the feet of Mother England.
Look carefully at this man. He's the Emperor of Japan, whose forces have committed the appalling atrocities against British Empire and Chinese troops and civilians, men and women in Hong Kong. These are the swine who bound and bayoneted our helpless soldiers in their hands. If these pictures serve to kindle a flame of vengeance throughout the civilized world, they will have served their purpose. Let the cry be vengeance, bloody vengeance!
미국 대중과 의회는
For the second time, the American public and Congress were overwhelmingly against entering the war in Europe.
Another war, not for me. This time America should keep out, and I know I will. If war breaks out in Europe, I think that this country should heed the advice of its first president and avoid all foreign entanglements. In the event of war in Europe, I think we should stay out of it entirely.
프랭클린 루즈벨트 대통령은
So, President Franklin Roosevelt needed something that could provoke Hitler into declaring war on the US and frighten the public into action.
그래서 그는
He did this by deliberately failing to warn his fleet commanders that a surprise Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was imminent.
그에게 경고는
The warnings came to him from the governments of Britain, Australia, and the Soviet Union, and are now a matter of public record.
문건으로 분류되어 있다. 우리 조선은 미국인들에게 위험을 알린
We in Korea were among the first to alert the Americans because we know better than anyone what the vicious Japanese are capable of.
알고 있었기 때문이다.
Slaughtered by Japanese troops.
More power to you, President Roosevelt. The entire country's behind you, thrilled with hope and patriotism.
프로파간다를 이용하여
As if using propaganda to send their pacifist population to war wasn't bad enough.
어떻게 나치를 멸망시키고
Consider how America repaid its people for defeating the Nazis.
보면 그리 나쁘지만도 않은 것이었다. 종이
Operation Paperclip.
종이 클립 작전이다.
Operation Paperclip was the safe transfer of Nazi scientists and operatives into the CIA. Nazis like Josef Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death, who carried out live experiments on humans in the death camps. These death industry pros were given new identities as US citizens and employed in US laboratories to develop a dazzling array of mind control programs for the CIA, as well as new products and ideas for US biochemical warfare expansion.
Ultimately, they discovered LSD. All that drug stuff.
General Electric, DuPont,
Not only did companies like General Electric, DuPont, Ford, and Bell help with Operation Paperclip, but so did Americans like Prescott Bush, the patriarch of the presidents George Bush. Documents in the National Archives and Library of Congress show that he committed treason continuously between 1924 and 1951. First, by using Jewish slave labor in collusion with the Nazis, and then by bringing those Nazis and their assets into America. Despite being a traitor to his country, this Nazi collaborator became a senator, and his family has assumed great power in America. But they are not the only fascist family to thrive from tyranny against humanity. Court records show that the Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company was selling more oil to Hitler's war effort than to the Allies. And for this, a federal judge ruled John D. Rockefeller committed treason against the United States. Treason, the most heinous crime of all. Prior to World War II, this man joined fellow traitor Prescott Bush and the British royal family in sponsoring the eugenics initiatives that gave rise to Hitler's racial hygiene programs. Horrifyingly, today, the Rockefeller family, the UN, and World Health Organization remain at the forefront of administering population programs designed to reduce world populations to more manageable levels. One can only imagine what terrible ideas these monsters have in store for us. To understand how Rockefeller avoided being punished for treason, we need to go back to World War I, when Germany was winning the war without a single shot being fired on German soil. David Ben-Gurion, the head of a powerful group of Zionists and the American Rothschild family, approached the British with the promise to bring the Americans into the war. In return, they wanted Palestine. The British agreed to this land theft and, at the cost of American lives and money which has never been repaid, they signed the Balfour Declaration, which was addressed to Lord Rothschild from the British government, promising Palestine to the Rothschild Zionists as a national home for Jews. This is both sinister and unnecessary, since Jews lived peacefully for thousands of years amidst the Arab majorities in the Middle East and had no desire to steal their land. The Zionist collaboration with the British worked. Germany went from winning the war to capitulating and signing the Versailles Treaty at, where else, the Rothschilds' palace. Palestine was then declared a British mandate, and the Zionists were able to swiftly colonize Palestine after the Second World War. On May 14, 1948, after Rockefeller leaned on smaller countries in the UN to vote Israel into the United Nations, Israel declared its independence from British mandate.
Today, the British mandate over the land of Israel ends. We declare a Jewish state in the ancient land of Israel. It will be called the State of Israel.
And 1 year later had claimed 78% of Palestine, despite only owning 6% of it. The first Prime Minister of Israel was Zionist David Ben-Gurion, who employed Reuters, which was owned by the Rothschild Zionist organization, to start an enormous propaganda campaign, which continues to this day. Once Israel was established with UN approval, and the world was sold on the fairy tale of Jews finally returning to Israel, David Ben-Gurion started a campaign of ethnic cleansing. We have taken their country. We must do everything to ensure they never return. We must use terror, assassination, intimidation, land confiscation, and the cutting of all social services to rid the Galilee of its Arab population. David Ben-Gurion, 1948. For over 6 decades, Israel has tenaciously pursued this hateful agenda of colonization, ethnic cleansing, murder, terrorism, land theft, and cultural genocide with great success, thanks to American taxpayers who give $3 billion in direct economic and military assistance each year. It is widely understood that this money is currently being used to build this apartheid wall that costs an estimated $1 million per mile. Apartheid is a crime against humanity. Israel has deprived millions of Palestinians of their liberty and property and perpetuated a system of gross discrimination. Nelson Mandela. Israel has become Nazi Germany, destroying their victims' land, confiscating their property, putting them in concentration camps, even stamping numbers on their hands, a practice that led to Yafa Yarkoni, holder of the Israel Prize, to speak out. The occupied territories should be given back, and that's it. We should learn from the Holocaust not to abuse and humiliate other people. Yafa Yarkoni is talking about Article 49 of the Geneva Convention, which says that no state may put its own civilians as settlers into occupied territories. Settlers and settlement are, of course, propaganda phrases that evoke legitimate and comforting feelings of finding a home. However, as acclaimed journalist Robert Fisk writes in his novel, The Great War for Civilization, the far more disturbing and far more accurate word for Israel's land grabbing in the West Bank and Gaza since 1967 is colonizing. Settlers are colonists. So why doesn't the world condemn Israel and demand its withdrawal from the occupied territories? Why is America the only country still fervently supporting Israel and its policies? Nobel Peace Prize winner Bishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa observes that the Israeli government is placed on a pedestal in the U.S., and to criticize it is to be immediately dubbed anti-Semitic. People are scared in the U.S. to say wrong is wrong, because the Jewish lobby is powerful, very powerful. The most important propaganda victory for Israel has been selling the idea that it is the victim and the Palestinians are the terrorists. They do this by controlling the media. According to Israeli Holocaust historian Yehuda Bauer, the Holocaust is constantly exploited to deflect criticism of Israel and its own immoral policies. Hardly a month goes by without a new TV production, a new film, a new drama, new books, prose or poetry dealing with the subject. And the flood is increasing rather than abating. Professor Yehuda Bauer. The reality is that America's relationship with Israel could not withstand public scrutiny, which would quickly expose Israel not as a victim, but the most powerful country in the Middle East. It is the world's 4th largest nuclear power and the 5th largest arms producer. It possesses nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, but thanks to America, has never signed a non-proliferation treaty or agreed to international inspection. It is also an occupying power in a stolen land that is not held accountable for its actions by anyone.
watched with his own eyes.
이 지역에서
Anything that's mobile, that moves in the zone, even if it's a 3-year-old, needs to be killed.
지금 이 말은
This was said by an Israeli army officer who was acquitted of any wrongdoing after shooting 13-year-old schoolgirl Iman al-Hams 17 times.
사살한 후 사살한 것을
After confirming the kill to his soldiers, he emptied a full magazine into her head.
세계는 이런 일들에 대해서 알아낼
The world never finds out about these things because Israel doesn't allow it. It calls itself a democracy, but uses a type of propaganda called censorship, where certain phrases and words are not allowed.
Journalists
are not allowed to use the word Palestine. It's the terrorist infrastructure. These territories are not occupied, they are disputed. These are not humans seeking freedom from oppression, they are terrorists. This is not an apartheid wall, it's a security barrier. This is not assassination and murder, it is pacification. This is not state-sanctioned terror, it is self-defense.
This
is all part of a carefully orchestrated plan to dehumanize their victims. A tool learned from what the Nazis did to Jews, homosexuals, gypsies, and the mentally diminished. This propaganda phrase is needed when the imperialist decides to carve up or give away something that doesn't belong to them, like Palestine or Korea. Thanks to Western propaganda, half the world still believes their invasion of Korea in 1950 was needed to fight communism. They have no idea that our eternal leader was trying to unify Korea after their leaders tore us apart for war profiteering. They remain ignorant of why we feel harm towards this grave injustice. And what was the result of this manufactured war? A bombing campaign that destroyed 75% of our country and killed 4 million of our citizens. The American bandits also tested biological weapons by dropping infected insects and other agents on us and our Chinese brothers and sisters. Despite these evil and cowardly acts, the West was unable to defeat our glorious nation in the victorious Fatherland Liberation War. Despite a record 7 threats with nuclear weapons by the Americans, with their enormous wealth and military might, we remain undefeated, winning one victory after another, and we are now their longest-running adversary. They are afraid of us, but we are not afraid of them. The Americans label us unpredictable and dangerous, but America is the only nation insane enough to use nuclear weapons on their fellow human beings.
Rivers and streams throughout the city began to boil. People evaporated where they stood, leaving shadows of their bodies scorched onto the streets. In a matter of seconds, 4 square miles of Hiroshima became an atomic wasteland. Several minutes passed. Then a black rain began to fall on the city. sticky, pebble-sized drops of radioactive ash.
And it is America that has invaded 37 countries in the last 50 years.
I was there as a correspondent. This horrific picture.
We have invaded none. Even our limp-wristed brothers and sisters in the South feel harm towards the 33,000 imperial occupiers on their land. They also want the Americans to leave, so we can be reunited as one Korea. Don't the consumer slaves of the West want to know why their forces are occupying our country? Do they care? Do they even know? The answer is that most of them don't know and don't care. Because their owners have full control over what they see and think. Far more seductive than opium, infinitely more effective at shaping behavior and expectations than alcohol and religion, television is the most powerful weapon of psychological warfare in history. Consumer slaves in the West schedule their lives and relationships around watching television. They use it as a babysitter for their youth and wake up to this drug, consume it whenever possible during the day, and go to sleep with it. They even take it with their meals. Television, or TV as they call it in the West, doesn't kill. It pacifies, turning viewers into compliant zombies. They wear a vacant, glassy-eyed look on their faces because they are in a trance-like state. This is ideal. Now the consumer is sitting still and ready for indoctrination. No force is necessary here. He is a willing participant. It is no mistake that happiness in the West peaked in the 1950s.
Manipulate them in the interest.
Before television was used to enforce capitalism's consumer message. The message that you are not happy. Not unless you buy this product. Look like this person. Or drink this beverage. The West calls these images advertising. Advertising is both propaganda and propaganda distributor. Advertising is about hawking product and creates artificial needs, since most products are completely unnecessary.
Your favorite music?
Advertising unashamedly fosters unhappiness with oneself and with one's possessions. In fact, the very purpose of advertising is to open up emotional vulnerabilities and make people feel that without this product, they are defective.
You need to protect your skin, you need to hydrate your skin, you need to moisturize your skin, and you need to repair your skin.
Corporations employ psychologists, writers, and filmmakers to sell what is essentially the same product. A certain toothpaste, for instance, claims to have a feeling of freshness. This one claims to have dazzling strips of lightening ability, while this one is for people who claim to have teeth so sensitive that it feels like they've been stung by lightning. One of the tricks of effective advertising is to identify the product with a highly desirable quality that has widespread appeal. If you buy this, you will have clear skin and become attractive to others. And more beautiful. Use this product and pretend that you too can be a farmer. Drive this car and appear liberated and adventurous, like these actors. Advertisements are nothing but bait, laid out for certain types of consumers.
For up to 14 times more volume.
These same methods are used to glorify the corporations who make these products.
This
is called corporate propaganda. For example, the General Electric Company likes to boast about its imagination at work, which includes money lending and manufacturing equipment for building missiles and other armaments. The truth is that corporations exist only to make money and are even legally compelled to prioritize making profits over competing interests, such as the well-being of consumers. And there is no such thing as enough profit for the capitalist. This is why they promote globalization, the new slogan for empire. It allows them to promote their symbols, also known as brands, by using slave labor in third world countries. These imperial brands are a symbol of value and meaning, like a flag. But their only allegiance is to profit, not country. Their goal? Maximum profit. Their target? Human beings.
인간들을 자기들 나라나 인민, 환경에는 어떤 피해가
Turn them into mindless consumers who crave their product and keep buying it at any cost to their country, fellow citizens, and the environment.
이것이다.
And for what? Look at the background of this commercial. This product is for those with money and high social standing, according to the image. This is how the bizarre need to appear superior to friends, fellow workers, and neighbors is mercilessly enlarged and exploited. But advertising is not just for adults. Propagandists spend $12 billion per year specifically targeting children to form consumer habits early on. They can ingrain their brand by repeating it over and over until the child is indoctrinated and manipulated beyond control.
Norman Feeney, Pepsi drinker for life.
By 18 months, babies in the West can tell the difference between brands. And by 2, they're asking for brand products by name. From the age of 7, the average child has seen 20,000 TV commercials every year. There is only one other group more coveted and groomed by advertisers than any other: preteen and teenage girls. The propagandists call this the tween market. But in fact, it is corporate pedophilia. The aim of corporate pedophilia is to make young people feel inferior and defective by using images that are unattainable. And these images are used against consumers for the rest of their lives to keep them feeling inadequate, unless they buy their products and stick with their brands. The fashion industry is the same. Wear this and you might fit in. Look like this and you will be attractive and popular, like the people in these gossip magazines. These people are called celebrities.
Where do we begin? I mean...
While it is natural for a person to become popular for being the best at what they do, today in the West, you are a celebrity if you simply appear on screen. Any screen, even by mistake. You gain credibility and praise for nothing. And the more you appear, the bigger a celebrity you become. If you become a big enough celebrity, then you become a brand to be sold and traded like any other product. Meet Miss Kim Kardashian. She is famous for owning some clothes shops and going shopping. She wears diamonds and fur because they are symbols of wealth in the West. And because she believes she is superior to other humans, she ignores the true cost of these luxuries. This celebrity is called Madonna. She recently started a trend of shopping for children in third world countries, which gained her enormous publicity. She could have adopted one of the millions of poor black children in America who have no home. But that would not have gotten her the attention she so desperately craved. Meet Mr. Tiger Woods, an athlete who has made millions of dollars from his image as an honest, dependable family man, even though the greedy golfer was also having sex with over a dozen waitresses, porn stars, and C-grade models at the same time. This is B-grade actor Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Seen here with his wife when he was re-elected as governor of California. Unlike the other B-grade actor who served as governor of California, this actor won't be president because he fathered a child with the family maid in their marital bed. These two actors are very big celebrities. Their names are Brad and Angelina, and their brand is Brangelina. They also shop for children in third world countries. Like other celebrities, they constantly complain about the media attention they get, even though they have entire teams of propagandists who alert the media each time they go shopping for children, or purchase a coffee wearing the latest designer clothes. The truth is that celebrities like these are merely collaborators. For example, despite the fact that tobacco in the West is laced with more than 2,000 deadly chemicals designed to addict and kill humans, celebrities frequently appear in magazines, movies, and fashion shoots smoking cigarettes. Big Tobacco pays these trained monkey collaborators of death enormous amounts to smoke and glamorize their product, knowing that the youth want to be celebrities too.
Nicole, don't do that, you promised.
Sometimes celebrity exacts a terrible toll on the human brain, leading to confusion and misery. This poor man is Mr. Michael Jackson, a very famous musician who recently died from a drug overdose. Let's look at what America did to this man. His ancestors were raped from Africa and brought to America as slaves, and his childhood was spent working and performing for a violent father who colluded with record companies to profit from his talents. So much pain at the hand of capitalism leads to an identity crisis. These disturbing images are not film trickery, but the result of a practice known as plastic surgery. In surveys, 9 out of 10 women in the West are unhappy with their appearance, which drives them to spend enormous amounts of money buying cosmetics, clothes, and plastic surgery, despite the fact that they will never become celebrities or look like the models in the advertisements. This is consumerism. Many of the biggest celebrities have no talent at all. This very famous woman is called Miss Katie Price. Her brand name is Jordan. And despite my research, it seems clear that she doesn't actually do anything.
Love it.
This is Miss Paris Hilton. This narcissistic parasite comes from a wealthy hotel family. She glorifies her opulent lifestyle without guilt and is said to charge $150,000 to appear at parties. She even has a TV program called My New Best Friend Forever, where people compete to be her new best friend. Proof that anything in the West can be reproduced and commodified for profit. This is part of a trend in the West for what is called reality television. A type of freak show programming about talentless narcissists who like to talk about themselves and go shopping. In the field of American reality TV, competition is fierce for the most grotesque example of such exploitation. There are shows like The Swan, where women who are deemed ugly enter a plastic surgery competition to see who can be turned into the most beautiful.
She's just very masculine, face, body, basically everywhere. So we really need to change her body with a lot of liposuction, breast augmentation. We really need to feminize her face by doing a brow lift, rhinoplasty, take the fat of her cheeks and her chin. She really deserves to be in this program.
Without a doubt.
This one is called My Super Sweet 16, where children have tens of thousands of dollars spent on them simply because they are turning 16. They are treated like celebrities, despite the fact that they have achieved nothing and are out of touch with reality.
And if you're ready?
But this is nothing compared to a reality series called The Bachelor, where a handsome, wealthy young man declares his commitment to picking a wife from a bevy of 16 potential brides. His sincerity in talking to each woman is chilling, as are their claims to love him. After sampling all of the potential brides, he decides who to marry, turning the most personal of decisions into a commodity, an experience to be manipulated, packaged, and sold worldwide.
You guys ready?
Distraction techniques like television and celebrity magazines are the propagandist's best tools for keeping people from thinking and talking about important issues. Now, they have another. The games industry now generates more money than the film industry and has cemented the West as a culture of death, violence, and destruction. This is Grand Theft Auto 4. Here, you can kill anything that moves and have sex with prostitutes. This game appeals so much to people, it sold $500 million worth of units in its first week of sale. Because gaming and animation desensitizes violence and death, much of the billions in military spending goes into recruiting young, poor, and uneducated people to fight their Fortune 500 wars using these same techniques.
Most
serve 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year.
Come on, fire! Hey, Roger. Come on, let us shoot. 1-8, okay, clear. Come on.
This game is based on something called WWE, which stands for World Wrestling Entertainment. Extreme violence cheered on by Americans baying for blood. They know the names of each one of these actors, and yet they don't know where Britain is on the map, despite the efforts of the British to be their best friends. 85% of American young adults can't find Israel, Iraq, or Afghanistan on a world map. 30% of them can't find the Pacific Ocean on the map. 75% of them don't know the population of the US, and 11% of them can't even find it on a map. This is ideal, of course. Keep the masses ignorant and pacified on the couch. Distract them with violence, death, and the illusions of celebrity. Reduce resistance in thought. Make them choose the bland over the brilliant, the meaningless over the thoughtful, and dazzle them with trash. This is now what people around the world accept as normal. This manufactured reality has become more real than this. 38 million homeless Americans. But the media doesn't want people to know about these Americans. Not unless they can be used for entertainment.
You want to be on top?
Meet Miss Tyra Banks, a former clothes model who now has a talk show where she pretends to be concerned about people's problems and society in general, even though she has no qualifications to do this.
And so,
here, she dresses up and pretends to be homeless in order to experience life on the streets, which is impossible because she owns numerous homes and great wealth. The audience doesn't question this charade, but instead it willingly feeds into her need to talk about herself. Here we see America's Next Top Model, where everything is covered in her Tyra brand. Everyone has to shout and scream and appear delighted at the mere mention of her name. In this episode, she has the contestants made up to pose as blood-spattered and mangled corpses, while across the other side of the world, her fellow Americans were shooting, stabbing, and blowing up an estimated 1.8 million Iraqi civilians. Like most Americans, she doesn't know or care about these numbers. She is concerned only about a life of style over substance. There are now more propaganda-filled screens and magazines than at any other time in history. And these are controlled by just 5 giant media companies. This creates more opportunities to distract people from what really matters. More opportunities to brainwash them. More opportunities to sell them poisoned food and drugs they don't need. More opportunities to drip-feed them a meaningless, distorted reality. No, this is not a Hollywood blockbuster. The planes crashing into these towers are real, and these buildings crashed to the ground, including one that wasn't hit by anything at all. The American population was terrorized, hypnotized, and traumatized by repetitive showings of the devastation, with the media repeating over and over that it was a terrorist attack. However, 11 years after that day, it seems certain that everything was staged like a Hollywood blockbuster. Logic, physics, and history point to this incident being another false flag operation, like the bombing of the German Reichstag, Pearl Harbor, and the Gulf of Tonkin incident. And polls in the US confirm this. 87% of Americans now believe that 9/11 was a contrived pretext for an endless war on terror and the opportunity to remove their democratic rights and liberties.
One by one, the terrorists are learning the meaning of American justice.
But the real threat to Americans is not terrorism. Between 2001 and 2009, the number of deaths from terrorism in America stood at 3,000. In the same period, there were 192,000 deaths by homicide, 204,000 drunk driving, 360,000 suicide, 456,000 second-hand smoke, 873,780 diabetes, 4,622,268 cancer, 5,304,000 smoking-related, 6,238,284 heart disease.
Today our nation saw evil.
We will not rest until this evil is driven from our world.
But their leaders focus only on the phantom dangers of terrorism, while allowing food and drug companies to make more and more poisonous food that is killing its people like an internal, unspoken genocide. They even protect these killer companies. Cigarettes, for example, are the only consumer product that doesn't have to list its ingredients on the packet. To be fair, it would be difficult to fit the names of 2,000 poisons on such a small box. Here we are reminded that wars are not fought for flags and citizens, but for corporations. The war on terror, engineered by American propagandists to frighten and control their people, is impossible to win, but endlessly profitable. I'll be long gone before some smart person ever figures out what happened inside this Oval Office. George W. Bush. We are the only country left on the planet that has not been invaded by imperial propaganda. We have not succumbed to their tyranny, and we never will. Because we know what the ruling 1% is afraid of. They are afraid of real democracy. They are afraid that people will begin to recognize their propaganda and start rejecting it. They are afraid people will demand more power than the fraudulent auctions passed off as elections. They are afraid people will begin organized resistance and stop obeying laws designed to disempower them. They are afraid people will start asking why they have to fight wars for the Fortune 500 companies. They are afraid that people will start to realize that those who commit atrocities against humanity have names and can't hide behind flags and corporations forever. They are afraid that people will gather in mass crowds and make citizen arrests, or worse. More than anything, they are afraid that the world will decide it wants a new beginning. A revolution that has no place for the pillagers and plunderers and exploiters. We are the headquarters of this world revolution. We will fight to the death to defend our peaceful nation and beloved leader from the cruelty, exploitation, greed, enslavement, and violence against helpless peoples everywhere. We will defend ourselves as we defend the rights of billions of humans who do not benefit from 500 years of Western civilization and the cancerous empire of corporate collusion. We must remain vigilant at all times and be alert to their insidious attack on the mind. For they have come before, and they will come again.